What I'm looking for in technology development, science and technology development, is to present a clear picture to an adversary that they are at a disadvantage and that we can get to where they cannot, and we will get there first. And sometimes our system forgets that.
From the Defense and Aerospace Report, this is The Downlink, a podcast about the intersection of space, the space business, and defense. Not just what's over the horizon, but what's happening above it. I'm your host, Laura Winter. This week's episode is coming to you from the Convergence Center for Innovation and Collaboration located on the gorgeous campus of Purdue University. It's located in West Lafayette, Indiana. This weekend happens to be the Boilermakers' homecoming. They're hosting the Scarlet Knights from Rutgers University. By the time you hear this podcast, the game may very well be over. But right now, at just about 20 hours before kickoff, it's a little difficult to find a consensus prediction on who will win the game. The Scarlet Knights have the better record, 3 wins and 4 losses. And in the 2 previous meetings, they've beaten Purdue. But others say that despite having won 2 and lost 5, the home field advantage will put the Boilermakers on top because both wins were at home. It's difficult to predict the future. Purdue has struggled to finish drives while the Rutgers defense is ranked last in the Big Ten because they've given up the most yards. So what's probable? What will be the gaps in the way they execute their strategies? Who will have what it takes to exploit the opportunities? That's essentially what a group of highly experienced government scientists and engineers, along with academics and the odd space economist and journalist, that's me, we were tasked with considering the macro vectors of uncertainties in space operations and what circumstances and events could challenge or even break the resiliency of Space Force operations. We were talking about the future for the years 2035 through 2040, and it was an honor for me to be invited and to speak to that assembly. Now, I can't divulge what was said because the discussions were being held under Chatham House rules, but I can share with you a highlight, and that was meeting Richard Joseph, the 36th Chief Scientist of the United States Air Force. He's a physicist, and in 1983, he served on the Directed Energy Panel of the Defensive Technology Study Team. They produced a report that President Ronald Reagan then used as a blueprint for the Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars, a forerunner to today's Golden Dome project. He's worked on space systems, missile systems, and at NASA. His CV is really long and deeply intertwined with national security concerns. So I wanted to know what he thinks are the critical challenges in developing science and technology for future military operations in the space domain. But first, a quick note. I'm taking next week off, so I'll see you soon. Now, here's our conversation. Hey, Richard, thank you so much for making the time to come on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, Richard, it really is a huge honor to meet you here at Purdue University and to have the opportunity to talk about space futures and maneuver warfare and diplomacy and all that sort of stuff. And I really would love it if the audience could understand why. So could you just take a few moments and introduce yourself, like who you are, what you do, what you've done?
I've had a long career. I have been a researcher in science. I have been a program manager in government of large programs. I have helped organizations reorganize. I have helped them build their business. I've helped them manage their business. And I now am turning my attention to what the country is doing in its space program. I've always been attracted to the space program from the time I watched Alan Shepard go on his short flight, suborbital flight, to John Glenn orbiting the Earth, to watching the grainy images of the moon landing. And I have always been interested in that, and it's nice to come back to that today.
So when did you first start in government, and what were you doing?
Well, I suppose I first started in government when I went into the Air Force. I went in as a lieutenant, and I stayed for 10 years and was promoted to major and had to make a decision on whether to stay or go. And I decided that there were other things I wanted to do.
And one of those things that you started doing was a strategic defense initiative, was it not?
Right. I was on a committee, a presidential study that had been set up to define what the technical program for missile defense would look like, and that became the Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI. And I was leaving the Air Force, and I was offered a number of jobs, and I decided to go to Los Alamos National Laboratory because I had been a graduate student there. I loved the mountains, and I loved the environment in the lab of people who were all dedicated to their curiosity.
All right. So we should clue people in to the fact that you're also a physicist.
Well, I hope that's not a bad thing.
No, but it's a good thing to reveal, nevertheless, right? And especially when we consider, your interest in space, your interest in the military, your interest in and dedication to national security issues, right? I mean, that's your
and
that's
I am
foundation.
a physicist, and I am glad I'm a physicist.
Now, what was your last position that you held with the government?
Well, from January of 2018 until April of 2021, I was the Air Force chief scientist. And for a short period in 2019 to 2020, I was dual-hatted as the Space Force chief scientist as well.
Okay, now that's a lot. That's a lot of science.
It's a lot of science, yes.
It's also a lot of thinking about the future in terms of science, scientific discovery, technological discovery, I guess you could say. Maybe that's not the right way to say it, but maybe technological development is a better way to say it. There's a lot that a chief scientist has to think about in terms of the future. And we're here at Purdue participating in a futures conference for the future of in-space maneuverability, the resiliency of it. I want to know, how important is it, though, for us to think about that? And would we really want to think about it now, or do we need to start thinking about it in times that are further out? Like, what's a good time period for us to actually focus on, for us to make a difference?
Well, it's, one of the mistakes that we often make, all of us make, when we think about the future, is we think that we are journeying into the future. But the reality is the future is coming at us. And the difference is we can be ready for it, we can prepare ourselves, but we can't make a plan and just decide that we're going to be in the year 2055 and we'll be doing this, because we don't know what's going to happen in the intervening years. So the other thing is that if you try to anticipate where things are going, then you can't move very quickly. You have to wait for those events to present a problem, then you have to solve the problem, and it makes for very slow progress. People today talk about the need to go fast. But it doesn't matter if you're skiing or running or driving a race car. If you want to go fast, you have to look ahead. And the faster you want to go, the further ahead you need to look. So this activity is trying to look ahead in the development of space, the space industry, and the government's role in that. And it's a good thing to do. Otherwise, you're constantly surprised because the future is coming at you and got to be ready.
So let me ask you, if you were to choose one of the few future bright spots, as in, let's not quite go down the dark road yet, but if you were to think about some of the future bright spots, things that you're looking forward to in terms of technological development, whether it be military or otherwise, and space systems, what would that be?
Oh, my. I believe that right now one of the things that hampers our development in space is our reliance on chemical rockets. And I think that we need to find a better way. And that doesn't just mean, for instance, some have proposed a nuclear rocket. While I think that's interesting, it still works on the same principle, heating a gas to a high temperature, getting a higher ISP, and reducing, therefore, the total fuel load. And we do have electric propulsion, but so far they're pretty small, pretty meager. And I think we need to work on some technologies that would provide robust thrust. And we need to be able to do that if we are going to travel long distances, if we're going to go to the solar system, explore the solar system with humans or beyond. That means generating large amounts of electricity, and nuclear can be very good at that. But then the electricity can sort of amplify the advantage by creating thrust with it. Right now, it's accelerating a plasma, but I'm interested in accelerating nanoparticles and microparticles.
Why?
Because it increases the momentum transfer to the rocket, but at the expense of more energy, higher power levels. And so there are lots of nice, sweet problems to solve in that, but I think the payoff is great.
So let's switch to the dark side. What are some of the things that worry you about the future? And, I'm not talking about the future that's 5 years out, but let's say 10, 15, 20 years out. I mean, we have the Space Force. They're going to be putting out two documents that are very forward-looking, that are going to be looking 15 years in the future. But there has been some discussion that the way we approach the future is we approach it as if it was just an extension of what is happening today.
Well, there are a lot of worries, but one of the worries is the creation of bureaucracies to solve problems. Bureaucracies aren't really designed to solve problems. They're designed to perform some action, printing out Social Security checks. They do that very well. And bureaucracies are able to deliver the mail. And bureaucracies do all kinds of great things, and they standardize processes so that the user can depend on and trust that process. But they don't do new things really very well. They
don't do science really, really well.
Well, they do established science, but they don't do exploratory science well. There's too much uncertainty for the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy always looks for stability. It always looks for a way of...
its core function is to provide stability.
It's to provide, and, thank goodness that we have the dedicated bureaucrats. We always say that word with an emphasis that makes it sound like it's something bad. But we have very dedicated civil servants. And I have to tell you, in my time as chief scientist, I saw so many people who are the heart and soul of this country, who are dedicated to serving the public.
Well, it's like a workbench, right? I mean, you need a workbench that's got good, 4 solid legs,
right,
that you can do the work on. And if you don't have a solid workbench, well, then the work will suffer. You won't have a level
You can't make
surface.
anything real if you don't have the workbench. However, if you are trying to do something new, that process doesn't necessarily fit the innovation that is needed for something new. And that's why one of the areas I have encountered is that the system that exists, the bureaucracy that exists to buy things, to develop new systems and such, is really based on stability, not doing the wrong thing, not drifting off the path, and so on. And that's okay. But when it comes to research and coming up with new ideas and developing new ideas to the point where we may want to make them real, it's not very good. And yet we entrust those functions to this acquisition system, which I don't think the people are bad, but I think the system is bad. And it's not well suited to exploratory development of new technologies.
And how does that affect our defense and our ability for readiness?
Well, you can see it in the length of time it takes to actually go from early stage work to final systems and the cost overruns that occur during that period. If you were to take a look at the cost of and length of time to develop new fighter aircraft for the Air Force, you would find going back 30 or 40 years, 50 years, that the time has more than doubled to do that. And the cost, of course, have grown proportionately.
But isn't that also because we're using more advanced materials? We're putting on a whole bunch of kit now, right? I mean, the technology has increased in that, and the engineering itself just drives up cost.
Well, we looked at that and concluded that there's a lot of interaction with others in the system, with other offices in the bureaucracy. Everybody wants to be a part of it, all mean well. But the fact is, when you are putting new things, new technologies, new materials in, there's only one authority that matters, and that's Mother Nature. And you have to be checking to make sure that what you think you know is actually so. And so we talked about rapid experimentation, doing lots of experiments to make sure that you really are where you think you are. And that's not very popular in that acquisition system. They decided at some point, you just want to get into manufacturing as quickly as possible. I have been there as a program manager. If I can just get a large budget, I can move fast. And the reality is, when I got a large budget, I didn't move any faster. I spent all my time trying to maintain a large budget. And that does not argue for small budgets to build new airplanes. That's not going to work either. But there has to be an approach that is looking at validating everything that we're doing as rapidly as possible. And that becomes a way of operating for the people in the project. After a while, you don't have to tell them you need to go make a measurement here and make sure that you really do understand what's going on. They just do it. And that occurs in some very dynamic industries. And I look at...
And you would say that currently our acquisitions process is not that, does not have that kind of dynamism.
It's afraid to make a mistake, and as a consequence, it makes lots of mistakes. Think of somebody who's skiing down a difficult course, a slalom course. The first thing they have to do is they have to look ahead. They can't ski down the course by looking at the tips of their skis and trying to make adjustments at the last instant because they weren't looking ahead. And they can't ski it if they don't have the fundamental skills needed to control the skis and control themselves on the skis. And so when you put a premium on somebody on the sidelines saying, you need to move your left foot and left ski forward a little bit more before you make that turn on the 8th gate, it's a disaster that's going to happen. And that's what the acquisition system does. It wants to warn the developer that we have a process and you need to follow that process. So only then it becomes, let's send what you're going to do, write up a full report, send it to some group that then looks at it. And the question is, how much do these groups know about making the thing that we're trying to make? In many cases, nobody knows how to make those things. They're a first-of-a-kind, one-of-a-kind project. And at any rate, it's a system that really needs an overhaul. And by the way, that was one of the bright spots when the president announced Golden Dome, because he said, can't we do something about this defense acquisition system? And I thought, bingo, put his finger right on the key issue. And we need to reform that system, but we don't need the people who are necessarily schooled in that system for decades to make the reforms. We need to listen to them, but the reforms are going to come from outside that system.
Well, we're still waiting for what the possible architecture would be. I mean, he made the announcement, what was it, in January?
Yeah. Well,
right. Okay. So if this is going to be a reform of the system and a quickly moving thing, are we moving quickly? Can we? I mean,
no. In a word, no. Look, with SDI, it took us years to understand how defenses worked. And our goal was a little different then. Our goal was to actually bring about the end of the Soviet Union. And it played a big role in that. But it's different now. Now the idea is to actually blunt an attack.
A real one. A strategic level knockout.
A strategic or tactical even. And the people, when I am asked, do you think Golden Dome is possible? And I say, well, it depends what it is. And if you want to build an impenetrable shield, probably not possible. If you want to be able to do well enough to dissuade an enemy from attacking us, I think that's doable. But it may be a different system than the first one that I described. But unless we fix the way we develop and buy systems, none of that will matter. It won't be possible. It won't work. And the president was right to do it. He has been in a position where he has developed projects that were very expensive, and he did it with investors' money, and he found that there were all these organizations, planning boards, et cetera, that could influence the pace of the project. And I said, developers go through that all the time. The government seems to be blind to that. Although recently I have seen changes on requirements, decisions, and within the defense acquisition system, I think some of these reforms have already started and they're long overdue.
So thinking about, again, why we're here and thinking well ahead of our skis, I think the epoch that we're looking at is, 2035 to 2040. What is in that epoch do you think is probably the number one most difficult thing to see as a possibility that for us to handle?
Well, there's certainly the state of technology. There is also the world order that plays a big role. If we only look at this from the point of view of our own security, it becomes a little easier if we include the security of our allies, our friends, our partners. It becomes more complex because you have to be respectful of their economy and their society. If it includes a realignment among our adversaries, and some of that is taking place, then that becomes something we're going to have to deal with. And the character of it will be different from what we have experienced to date.
And as we're running out of time, and we are, but there was something that you said yesterday that I thought was incredibly thoughtful, and I believe is sometimes forgotten. And it was about technology, battles, and wars. And I don't know if you remember what you said, but if you
I've
could
been
explain.
reminded about 5 times this morning of what I said.
All right. Well, if you could give that to us as a gift, I think that would be really, really helpful.
What I said is the purpose of science and technology research in the military is to make the fight unfair. And I'm picking up on Roger Penske, who owns some of the most successful racing teams in motorsports, in the history of motorsports. And he once said, I once read that he said he was always looking for the unfair advantage. And I think that's what we're talking about. He was looking for something that wasn't against the rules, but pressed the rules so hard that it looked like it was unfair, but it gave an advantage to his team. What I'm looking for in technology development, science and technology development, is to present a clear picture to an adversary that they are at a disadvantage and that we can get to where they cannot, and we will get there first. And sometimes our system forgets that and thinks that science and technology is a playground that makes miracles. Well, it rarely are miracles, but they are advantages. And the whole idea is to make sure that our adversaries can see that. It's demoralizing, discouraging, and it's deterring. Because the whole idea of our military forces is to not fight if we don't have to. It's to deter conflict. But if we do have to, if that deterrence fails, then we want to make sure we prevail.
Richard, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed this.
That's it for this week. For your daily dose of award-winning defense coverage, listen to the Defense and Aerospace Report with Vago Muradian. And for the maritime domain, listen to Cavas Ships with Chris Cavas and Chris Cervello. And get your air domain news and analysis from the Air Power Podcast with JJ Gertler and Vago Muradian. I'm Laura Winter. Thank you for listening.